Stop her. Someone stop this woman. The crack of splitting wood echoed through Riverside Memorial Chapel's marble halls as Vanessa Hartley swung the hammer again, her arms trembling with a force she didn't know she possessed. The mahogany casket seal shattered under the blow, splinters flying across the polished floor where moments ago, mourners had been quietly taking their seats. Behind her, Michelle Carmichael's scream pierced the air, raw, furious, desperate. Funeral staff rushed forward, their polished shoes squeaking against the floor, hands reaching to grab Vanessa's shoulders, her wrists, anything to stop the madness unfolding before their eyes. But Vanessa had already torn through the white silk lining, her fingers clawing at the fabric with wild urgency. Inside the casket lay Elizabeth Carmichael, the wealthy philanthropist everyone believed had passed peacefully 3 days ago. Everyone except Vanessa. Look at her hand. Vanessa gasped, her voice breaking as security grabbed her arms, pulling her back. She's moving. Can't you see? She's alive. The chapel fell into shocked silence. Every eye turned toward the casket, toward the impossible sight of Elizabeth Carmichael's fingers twitching against the satin pillow. Michelle lunged forward, her elegant composure shattered, her face contorted with something that looked less like grief and more like panic. She's delusional. Michelle's voice cut through the chapel like ice. Get her out of here now. But as Vanessa stood there, restrained by security, watching Elizabeth's chest rise with the faintest breath, she had no idea that saving this woman's life was about to put her own daughter in mortal danger. To understand how Vanessa ended up destroying a sealed casket in front of horrified mourners, we have to go back to 3 days earlier, to the moment Elizabeth Carmichael's body first arrived at Riverside Memorial Chapel. Before we get into that, here's a special shout out to Michelle Hartley watching from France. Thank you for being one of our amazing supporters and engaging with the channel. A character in the story was named in your honor. If you'd also like to get a shout out in the next video, please like, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from, and you'll be given a shout out. Thank you. Now let's get into the story. 3 days earlier, Vanessa Hartley's alarm cut through the darkness of her South Side Chicago apartment at 5:47 a.m. She silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Sophia, though her 16-year-old daughter was already stirring in the next room. Mom, Sophia's sleepy voice called out. You working the early shift again? Yeah, baby. There's cereal in the cabinet and money on the counter for lunch. Vanessa pulled on her work uniform, simple black slacks and a pressed white shirt that marked her as support staff at Riverside Memorial Chapel. You getting to school okay? I'm 16, not 6. Sophia appeared in the doorway, her hair wrapped in a silk scarf, rubbing sleep from her eyes. When will you be home? Probably around 7. We've got a service coming in today, big one, I think. Vanessa grabbed her keys and kissed Sophia's forehead. Lock the door behind me. Love you. Love you too. The morning commute to downtown Chicago took 43 minutes on the Red Line, giving Vanessa time to mentally prepare for another day of work most people preferred not to think about. She'd been at Riverside Memorial for 6 years now, long enough that death had become routine, another part of life that required careful handling, respectful silence, and attention to details most people never noticed. She arrived at the chapel at 7:18 a.m., clocking in through the staff entrance. The morning air carried that distinct smell of lilies and furniture polish that permeated every funeral home she'd ever entered. Morning, Vanessa. Marcus, the senior funeral director's assistant, looked up from the intake schedule. You're on prep duty today. We've got a prominent family coming in around 9, Elizabeth Carmichael. You heard of her? Vanessa shook her head, pulling on latex gloves. Should I have? Lincoln Park money. Real estate fortune, philanthropist, all that. Family wants everything handled quickly. Funeral scheduled for Thursday. Thursday? That's only 3 days from now. Marcus shrugged. When you've got money, you make your own timeline, I guess. Just make sure everything's perfect. Mr. Henderson wants this one handled with extra care. At 9:14 a.m., the delivery van arrived from the medical examiner's office. Vanessa positioned herself near the receiving entrance, clipboard in hand, ready to document the intake process. The rear doors opened, and 2 attendants carefully wheeled out a gurney bearing Elizabeth Carmichael's body, draped in the standard white sheet. Behind the van, a black Mercedes pulled into the visitor parking. 2 people emerged, A woman in her early 40s wearing a perfectly tailored black dress and designer sunglasses, and a man around the same age, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen. Even from a distance, Vanessa could read the difference between them. The woman moved with crisp efficiency, checking her phone as she approached. The man walked as though his legs might give out at any moment. "I'm Michelle Carmichael," the woman said, extending her hand to Mr. Henderson, who'd appeared to greet the family personally. "This is my brother, Gregory. We're here regarding our mother's arrangements. My deepest condolences." Mr. Henderson's voice carried that practiced tone of professional sympathy. "We'll take excellent care of your mother. If you'll follow me to my office, we can discuss the arrangements." Gregory hadn't spoken yet. He stared at the gurney being wheeled inside, his face pale, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. Michelle touched his elbow with what might have been meant as comfort, but her attention was already back on Mr. Henderson. "I've taken the liberty of reviewing your premium service packages online," Michelle said as they walked toward the administrative wing. "I'd like to discuss the timeline. We're hoping to have the service on Thursday." Vanessa followed protocol, accompanying Elizabeth's body to the preparation room. She had a system, a ritual of respect she performed for everyone who came through Riverside Memorial, regardless of whether they were wealthy philanthropists or individuals whose families could barely afford the most basic services. She documented everything: personal effects, jewelry, the condition of the body upon arrival. Elizabeth Carmichael looked peaceful, her silver hair carefully styled even in death, her hands folded across her chest. A substantial diamond ring caught the overhead lights. Vanessa noted it on her inventory sheet: wedding band, platinum, estimated 3 carats. "Excuse me." Vanessa turned to find Michelle standing in the doorway of the preparation room, a space family members rarely entered. "I wanted to see her before you began the preparation process," Michelle said, though her tone suggested she was informing Vanessa rather than asking permission. "Just for a moment." "Of course." Vanessa stepped back, giving Michelle space. But Michelle didn't approach her mother's body with the desperate tenderness Vanessa had witnessed countless times before. Instead, she stood at a distance, her expression unreadable behind those designer sunglasses. After exactly 30 seconds, Vanessa couldn't help but count. Michelle nodded once. "Thank you. Please ensure everything is ready by Wednesday evening. The viewing will be Thursday morning, service at 2 p.m. She paused at the door. "And I trust you understand the importance of discretion. My mother was a very private person. We'd appreciate if staff kept conversations about our family to a minimum." "Of course, ma'am." After Michelle left, Vanessa returned to her work, but something nagged at her, something in the way Michelle had looked at her mother. Or rather, the way she hadn't looked at her. No tears. No trembling hands reaching out to touch Elizabeth's face one last time. Just cold assessment, like Michelle was inspecting a car she planned to sell. Vanessa completed her documentation and began the preparation process, trying to shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Grief showed itself in strange ways, she reminded herself. Not everyone cried. Not everyone fell apart. But as she worked, she couldn't stop thinking about Gregory's devastated face and Michelle's composed efficiency, and wondering why a family would insist on rushing through arrangements when they had all the time and money in the world. By the time she clocked out at 6:47 p.m., Vanessa had convinced herself she was overthinking things. It was just another service. Another family processing loss in their own way. She'd see this through professionally, just like she always did, and by Friday, the Carmichaels would be another entry in Riverside Memorial's records. She had no idea that in 72 hours, she'd be standing in that chapel with a hammer in her hands, making a choice that would change everything. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something wasn't right, but everyone told you it was nothing? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments below. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonably cold wind cutting through downtown Chicago. Vanessa clocked in at 7:23 a.m., already thinking about the Carmichael service scheduled for Thursday, less than 48 hours away. The expedited timeline meant double-checking every detail, ensuring nothing was overlooked in the rush. She was organizing flower delivery schedules in the back office when raised voices echoed from the chapel lobby. Vanessa recognized them immediately: Michelle and Gregory Carmichael. "We should wait at least another week, Michelle. I haven't even begun to process this." Gregory's voice cracked with emotion. "Mom deserves more than 3 days." Mom specified in her wishes that she wanted a simple, quick service. No prolonged mourning, no unnecessary delays. Michelle's tone was crisp, matter of fact. I'm honoring what she wanted. Her wishes? When did she tell you that? Because I never heard her say anything about Gregory. You were never around enough to hear anything Mom said. Some of us actually made time for her in her final months. The sharp edge in Michelle's voice could have cut glass. The estate attorney needs to begin processing paperwork. The insurance companies require death certificates. Life doesn't stop just because you need time to grieve. Vanessa busied herself with a clipboard, pretending not to hear, but the tension in Gregory's silence was palpable. This isn't about paperwork, Michelle. This is about saying goodbye to our mother. Then say goodbye on Thursday like everyone else. The arrangements are finalized. Footsteps clicked away across marble, Michelle's heels, confident and unwavering. A moment later, Vanessa heard what might have been a stifled sob from Gregory, then the heavy chapel doors opening and closing. At 11:30 a.m., Mr. Henderson called Vanessa to his office, his face carrying that expression of practiced praise he reserved for clients who spent generously. The Carmichael arrangements are proceeding smoothly, he said, reviewing paperwork. Michelle Carmichael specifically requested you continue handling the preparation room duties. She was impressed with your professionalism yesterday. Of course, sir. She's remarkably composed, isn't she? In my 30 years doing this work, I've rarely seen someone handle loss with such grace and organization. He shook his head admiringly. Some people fall apart. Others rise to the occasion. Michelle Carmichael is clearly the latter. Vanessa nodded, though something in her chest tightened. Composed was one word for it. Detached was another. At 2:15 p.m., Vanessa was replacing the lilies in the viewing room when she heard the preparation room door open down the hall. She'd locked it after completing her morning work. Protocol required it. Frowning, she walked quietly toward the sound. Through the small window in the door, she saw Michelle standing beside her mother's casket. But she wasn't crying, wasn't reaching out to touch Elizabeth's hand one final time. Instead, she was simply standing there, staring down at her mother's face with an expression Vanessa couldn't quite read. Clinical. Assessing. Michelle glanced at her watch, then turned and walked toward the door. Vanessa quickly stepped back, pretending to review the flower arrangement schedule on her clipboard. Oh, Vanessa. Michelle emerged, her composure perfect. I was just having a private moment with my mother. I hope that's acceptable. Of course, ma'am. I understand completely. Good. I wanted to discuss the casket. My brother seems to think we should select something more elaborate, but I believe simplicity honors our mother's values better. Michelle pulled out her phone, scrolling through options. I'd like to finalize the selection today and have it sealed by Wednesday evening. The viewing will be closed casket. Closed casket. Vanessa tried to keep her tone neutral. Most families prefer open casket for viewings, especially when my mother valued privacy in life. She would have wanted privacy in death. Michelle's voice carried that particular tone that ended discussions. Please make the arrangements. At 4:30 p.m., Vanessa assisted Michelle with the final casket selection in the showroom. Michelle walked past the ornate mahogany options, the hand-carved details, the premium selections with silk linings and brass fixtures. She stopped at a mid-range model, elegant but unremarkable. This one. Are you certain, ma'am? Given your mother's prominence in the community, many families choose this one, Michelle repeated. And I want it sealed immediately after final preparations. No delays, no last-minute viewings. Everything locked and ready by tomorrow evening. Vanessa made notes on her tablet, trying to ignore the growing unease in her stomach. Sealed caskets weren't unusual, but combined with the rushed timeline, the family tension, Michelle's cold efficiency, something felt wrong. Not illegal. Not even inappropriate. Just wrong in a way Vanessa couldn't articulate. Will your brother want to see your mother one final time before we seal the casket? Michelle's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. My brother will have the same opportunity as everyone else at the viewing on Thursday. No special accommodations. As Michelle signed the final paperwork, Mr. Henderson appeared, his smile warm and accommodating. Everything proceeding to your satisfaction, Miss Carmichael? Perfectly. Your staff has been very professional. Michelle handed the papers back. Especially Vanessa here. So detail-oriented. So observant. Something in the way Michelle said, observant, made Vanessa's skin prickle. By 6:45 p.m., Most of the staff had left for the evening. Vanessa should have left too. Sophia would be wondering where she was. She pulled out her phone and typed quickly, "Working late, baby. Leftovers in fridge. Home by 9. Love you." Sophia's response came immediately. "You okay, Mom? You never work this late on Tuesday. Just busy week. Promise I'm fine." But Vanessa wasn't sure that was true. She sat in the break room, staring at her lukewarm coffee, trying to understand why this particular service felt so different from the hundreds of others she'd handled. Michelle's controlling precision, Gregory's obvious anguish, the rushed timeline, the insistence on sealing everything quickly. Grief manifested differently in everyone, Vanessa reminded herself. Some people needed to maintain control when everything felt chaotic. Some people threw themselves into logistics to avoid feeling the pain. Michelle wasn't doing anything wrong, just handling loss her own way. Vanessa finished her coffee and stood, gathering her belongings. She was overthinking this, letting her imagination create problems where none existed. By Friday, the Carmichael service would be complete, and she'd wonder why she'd wasted so much mental energy on routine family dynamics. She locked up the preparation room one final time, double-checking that everything was secure, and headed for the Red Line station. Tomorrow would be Wednesday. Final preparations, last details, everything made ready for Thursday's service. Just another funeral. Just another family saying goodbye. If you're already hooked by this story and want to see how it unfolds, hit that subscribe button. It costs you nothing but means everything to this channel. Don't be the person who watches till the end without subscribing. I see you. Thursday morning arrived with overcast skies that matched the solemnity of the day. Vanessa reached Riverside Memorial Chapel at 6:30 a.m., 90 minutes before her scheduled shift, unable to sleep, driven by a restlessness she couldn't explain. The funeral was set for 2 p.m., with viewing beginning at noon. Everything needed to be perfect. She moved through the chapel with practiced efficiency, adjusting flower arrangements, ensuring the guest registry was positioned correctly, checking that the lighting created the appropriate atmosphere of respectful mourning. By 8 a.m., other staff members began arriving, and by 10:30, the first guests trickled in. Colleagues of Elizabeth's from various charitable organizations, society figures in expensive black attire, speaking in hushed tones about what a loss this was for Chicago's philanthropic community. At 11:47 a.m., Vanessa began her final inspection routine, a checklist she'd performed hundreds of times. She walked through the chapel one last time, verifying that every detail met Riverside Memorial standards. The casket sat at the front of the room, closed as Michelle had insisted, surrounded by elaborate flower arrangements that probably cost more than Vanessa's monthly rent. She approached the casket slowly, clipboard in hand, checking the placement, the stability of the stand, the arrangement of the flowers flanking either side. Then she noticed something that made her pause. On the interior glass viewing panel, the small transparent section that allowed family members one final glimpse during closed casket services, there was condensation. Faint, barely visible, but definitely there. Vanessa frowned, leaning closer. Condensation required warmth, moisture, breath. The chapel was climate-controlled, cool enough to preserve flowers, but not cold enough to create condensation on glass. And certainly not on the interior of a sealed casket. Her heart began to beat faster. She glanced around. Guests were still in the lobby. Staff members were in the administrative wing. She was alone in the chapel. Vanessa leaned closer to the glass panel, her face inches from the casket, and that's when she saw it. The white silk lining covering Elizabeth's chest, it moved. Not much, just the faintest rise and fall, so subtle she might have imagined it. Except she didn't imagine it. She saw it again, and again. "Oh my God," Vanessa whispered, her hands beginning to shake. "Oh my God, no." She pressed her face against the viewing panel, her breath fogging the glass further, and watched Elizabeth Carmichael's chest rise with the barest hint of breath. Once, twice, 3 times in 30 seconds. Vanessa's clipboard clattered to the floor. This wasn't possible. Elizabeth had been examined by medical professionals, declared deceased, transported by the medical examiner's office. 3 days had passed. This couldn't be happening. But it was happening, right in front of her eyes. Vanessa spun around, her mind racing, and ran toward the administrative wing. Her supervisor, Marcus, was reviewing final arrangements with Mr. Henderson in his office. "Marcus!" Vanessa burst through the door, breathless, her voice too loud. "Marcus, I need you to come with me right now. Something's wrong with the Carmichael casket." Marcus looked up from his paperwork, irritation crossing his face. "Vanessa, we have guests arriving." "What are you talking about?" "I think." She struggled to form the words because they sounded insane even in her own head. "I think Elizabeth Carmichael might still be alive." The room fell silent. Mr. Henderson's expression shifted from surprise to concern, not for Elizabeth, but for Vanessa. "Vanessa," Mr. Henderson said carefully, using the tone one might use with someone in crisis. "I understand this has been a stressful week, but there's condensation on the interior glass panel, and I saw movement. Her chest is rising. She's breathing." Vanessa heard her voice climbing higher, faster. "Please, you have to come look. Right now." Marcus exchanged a glance with Mr. Henderson that Vanessa recognized immediately, the look that said this employee is having a breakdown. "Vanessa, you've been working double shifts all week," Marcus said gently. "You're exhausted. Sometimes when we're tired, we see things that aren't." "I'm not seeing things. I know what I saw." Vanessa grabbed Marcus's arm. "Please, just come look. 5 seconds. That's all I'm asking." Marcus sighed and stood, clearly humoring her. They walked back to the chapel, where more guests had now gathered in the lobby, their voices creating a low murmur of conversation. Vanessa led Marcus to the casket, pointing at the viewing panel. "Look, right there. Do you see the condensation?" Marcus leaned in, squinting. "Vanessa, I don't see anything. It was there 30 seconds ago, I swear. But look at the silk lining. Watch her chest." They stood there in silence for 15 seconds. 20. 30. The silk didn't move. "Vanessa." Marcus's voice was kind but firm. "There's nothing there. Elizabeth Carmichael has been deceased for 3 days. You know this. You helped prepare her yourself. But I saw. You're stressed. You're exhausted. These things happen in our line of work, especially when we push ourselves too hard." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Why don't you take your break now? Get some fresh air, drink some water. The service doesn't start for another 2 hours. Marcus, please. Something is wrong. I know what I saw." "Vanessa." His tone shifted, becoming less gentle. "The Carmichael family will be arriving any minute. We have over 100 guests expected. I cannot and will not delay this service based on what is clearly a stress-induced." "She's breathing." "Enough." Mr. Henderson had appeared beside them, his expression severe. "Vanessa, you need to step away from the casket right now. If you cannot compose yourself, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises." Vanessa looked from Marcus to Mr. Henderson, then back at the casket. The condensation had faded. The silk lining remained still. But she knew what she'd seen. She knew it. "I'm not crazy," she whispered. "No one said you were," Mr. Henderson replied. "But you are behaving inappropriately, and I need you to either step away and collect yourself, or clock out and go home." Vanessa's hands were still shaking. She looked at the casket one more time, willing the movement to return, willing them to see what she'd seen. But Elizabeth Carmichael remained perfectly still, surrounded by flowers and candlelight, looking exactly like what everyone believed she was, a woman at peace after a life well lived. "Take your break, Vanessa," Marcus said quietly. "We'll discuss this after the service." Vanessa walked toward the staff break room on unsteady legs, her mind racing. She'd seen it. She knew she had. But now, standing there watching the clock tick closer to the service start time, she had to face an impossible question. What if she was wrong? And what if she wasn't? What would you do in this moment? Risk your career and reputation, or trust the professionals around you? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Vanessa stood in the staff break room, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of water she couldn't bring herself to drink. Through the window, she could see the chapel parking lot filling with cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a few Teslas. Chicago's elite, arriving to pay respects to one of their own. She checked her watch, 1:23 p.m. 37 minutes until the service began. Her hands were still shaking, not from fear or exhaustion, but from absolute certainty. She'd seen Elizabeth breathing. She'd seen the condensation. And now everyone thought she was losing her mind. The break room door opened, and Mr. Henderson entered, his expression grave. "Vanessa, I think it would be best if you went home for the day. Mr. Henderson, please listen to me. I've already called in Rebecca to cover your duties." His voice was gentle but unyielding. You've been working too hard, and this job takes a toll on all of us eventually. Take the rest of the week off. We'll discuss your return on Monday. You're not hearing me. Elizabeth Carmichael is alive in that casket, and if we don't open it right now, we're going to bury a living woman." Mr. Henderson's expression hardened. "If you continue making these accusations, I'll have no choice but to consider this a serious performance issue. Do you understand what you're saying? You're suggesting that medical professionals, the medical examiner's office, and our entire staff somehow failed to notice that a woman was alive. That's not just unlikely, Vanessa. It's impossible. But I saw. What you saw was condensation that can occur naturally in climate-controlled environments, and fabric that appeared to move because you were looking for movement. The mind plays tricks on us, especially under stress." He moved toward the door. "Go home, Vanessa. That's not a suggestion." He left before she could respond. Through the break room window, Vanessa watched the Carmichael family's limousine pull up to the chapel entrance. Gregory emerged first, his face haggard and pale. Michelle followed, composed and elegant in a black Chanel dress, speaking on her phone even as they walked toward the entrance. Vanessa made a decision. If no one in authority would listen, she'd go directly to the family. She left the break room and entered the chapel lobby, weaving through clusters of guests offering condolences. Gregory stood near the guest registry, accepting handshakes and murmured sympathies with the mechanical responses of someone moving through a nightmare. "Mr. Carmichael?" Vanessa approached him, her voice low and urgent. "I need to speak with you. It's about your mother." Gregory looked at her with hollow eyes. "I'm sorry, are you? I work here. I helped prepare your mother for the service. Sir, I know this sounds impossible, but I believe there's a chance your mother might still be alive. I saw movement, I saw." "What did you just say?" Gregory's voice cracked. "The casket. Something's not right. I think we need to open it before." "Gregory, is everything all right?" Michelle appeared at her brother's elbow, her eyes sharp as she assessed Vanessa. "Who is this?" "She's saying Mom might be." Gregory couldn't finish the sentence. Michelle's expression shifted instantly, warm concern replacing cold assessment. She touched Vanessa's arm with what seemed like genuine sympathy. "You must be Vanessa. Mr. Henderson just told me you've been having a difficult day." Her voice was honey smooth, patronizing. "I understand completely. Grief affects all of us differently, and working in this environment must be incredibly taxing on your mental health. This isn't about grief or mental health. I saw your mother breathing. Sweetheart, you saw fabric shifting, maybe condensation from the temperature control. These old buildings have quirks." Michelle's smile was patient, understanding, infuriating. "My mother passed peacefully 3 days ago. Multiple professionals confirmed it. What you're experiencing is a very human response to stress and overwork. I know what I saw." "Of course you do. And I'm sure it felt very real to you." Michelle glanced at her watch. "The service begins in 20 minutes. Perhaps you should take Mr. Henderson's advice and rest. Gregory and I appreciate your concern, but we need this time to focus on saying goodbye to our mother. You understand." It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal, delivered with a smile that didn't reach Michelle's eyes. Vanessa looked at Gregory, pleading silently for him to listen, to question, to demand they check. But Gregory just stared at her with confused grief, then turned away to accept another round of condolences from arriving guests. Vanessa backed away, her heart pounding. Guests were filing into the chapel now, taking their seats. The string quartet in the corner began tuning their instruments. In 15 minutes, they'd start the processional. In 30 minutes, they'd seal that casket forever. She stood in the lobby, paralyzed by impossible choice. Walk away, keep her job, trust that she'd been mistaken. Or do something that would destroy her career, subject her to ridicule, maybe even legal consequences. But if she was right, if Elizabeth Carmichael was alive in that casket, walking away meant being complicit in someone's death. Vanessa's feet carried her away from the chapel, but not toward the exit. She moved through the administrative hallways, past Mr. Henderson's office, toward the maintenance supply room. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady as she pushed open the door and scanned the shelves. There, on the bottom shelf, a rubber mallet kept for adjusting casket hardware. She picked it up, feeling its weight, and something crystallized in her mind. She thought of Sophia at home, expecting her mother to come back tonight with stories about work. She thought of her 6 years at Riverside Memorial, her spotless record, her reputation for reliability and discretion. And then she thought of Elizabeth Carmichael, trapped in darkness, unable to move or scream, conscious of every passing second as her funeral proceeded around her. Vanessa walked back toward the chapel, the mallet hidden against her side. Guests were seated now. The quartet had begun playing something soft and mournful. Marcus stood near the entrance, reviewing the service program. She could still turn back, still walk away, still save herself. But Vanessa Hartley had spent her entire life being invisible, being dismissed, being told to trust the professionals and the people with authority. And for once in her life, she was going to trust herself instead. She stepped into the chapel. The afternoon light filtered through stained glass windows, creating patterns of color across the polished floor. Every seat was filled. Michelle sat in the front row, her posture perfect, her expression appropriately somber. Gregory sat beside her, his face buried in his hands. Vanessa walked down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet as guests noticed her approach. She reached the casket, surrounded by hundreds of dollars worth of white roses and lilies. "Ma'am," Marcus's voice behind her, urgent and confused. "Vanessa, what are you?" She raised the mallet above her head. "Vanessa is about to risk everything. Have you ever had to choose between following rules and doing what you knew was right? Share your experience below." The mallet came down with a crack that echoed through Riverside Memorial Chapel like a gunshot. Wood splintered. The seal broke. And Michelle Carmichael's scream pierced the air. "Stop her. Someone stop this woman." But Vanessa was already tearing at the white silk lining, her hands moving with desperate urgency, ripping through fabric as security guards rushed down the aisle. Strong hands grabbed her arms, pulling her backward, but not before she saw it. Elizabeth Carmichael's fingers, twitching against the satin pillow. "Look!" Vanessa gasped, struggling against the grip restraining her. Her hand. "She's moving." The chapel had erupted into chaos. Guests stood from their seats, craning to see. The string quartet had stopped playing mid-note. Michelle lunged forward, her composure shattered, her face twisted with something between rage and panic. "She's insane. She's destroyed." Michelle's voice broke. "Get her away from my mother." But Gregory had moved closer to the casket, his face white as paper, staring down at his mother's hand. "Michelle," he whispered. "Michelle," her fingers just moved. "I saw it. That's impossible. She's been dead for 3 days. This woman is delusional, she's." "Call 911. Mr. Henderson's voice cut through the chaos, his professional composure finally cracking. "Someone call 911 right now." One of the guests, a woman in the third row, was already on her phone. "Yes, we need paramedics at Riverside Memorial Chapel immediately. There's a woman in a casket who appears to be alive." "Yes, I know how that sounds." Vanessa stopped struggling against the security guards, her entire body shaking. She watched Elizabeth's chest rise and fall with barely perceptible movements, watched those fingers twitch again, and felt something between relief and horror wash over her. The paramedics arrived in 4 minutes, 4 minutes that felt like 4 hours. They pushed through the crowd of guests, their equipment bags hitting against pews, their radios crackling with dispatcher instructions. Everyone stepped back. The lead paramedic knelt beside the casket, immediately placing 2 fingers against Elizabeth's neck. His eyes widened. "I've got a pulse. Weak and thready, but it's there. Get the gurney now." Michelle's legs seemed to give out. She collapsed into the front pew, her hands covering her face, her shoulders shaking. Gregory stood frozen, watching the paramedics work with an expression of absolute disbelief. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Elizabeth, can you hear me?" The paramedic leaned close, checking her pupils with a penlight. Pupils responsive but sluggish. Respiration shallow. "We need to get her to Northwestern Memorial immediately." They lifted Elizabeth from the casket with practiced efficiency, strapping her to the gurney, starting in 4-line, placing an oxygen mask over her face. The chapel guests pressed back against the walls, creating a path to the door, their shocked faces tracking the impossible scene unfolding before them. "Is she going to be okay?" Gregory's voice was barely audible. "We're doing everything we can, sir." "Are you family?" "I'm her son. That's my sister." He gestured vaguely toward Michelle, who hadn't moved from the pew. "Meet us at Northwestern Memorial. We'll know more once we get her stabilized." The paramedics rushed Elizabeth out to the waiting ambulance, its lights already flashing red and blue against the chapel's stone facade. Vanessa stood in the aisle, still flanked by security guards who no longer seemed certain whether to restrain her or release her. Mr. Henderson approached slowly, his face ashen. Vanessa, I don't know what to say. Let me go to the hospital, Vanessa said quietly. Please. I need to know she's going to be okay. He nodded once, gesturing to the security guards to release her. Vanessa followed the ambulance in her 10-year-old Honda, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She'd been right. She'd been right, and she'd saved Elizabeth's life. But the magnitude of what had almost happened, what would have happened if she'd walked away, made her stomach churn. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, she sat in the emergency waiting room while doctors worked on Elizabeth. Gregory arrived 20 minutes later, his suit jacket gone, his tie loosened, looking like he'd aged a decade in the past hour. She's alive, he said, sitting heavily in the chair beside Vanessa. I still can't believe it. 3 days. We were 3 days away from. He couldn't finish the sentence. Michelle arrived another 10 minutes later, her earlier composure returned but strained. She didn't sit near Gregory. She stood by the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline, her phone pressed to her ear as she spoke to someone in low, urgent tones. At 4:47 p.m., Dr. Rachel Chun emerged from the emergency department, her expression serious but not grim. Mr. Carmichael? I'm Dr. Chun. Your mother is stable. Gregory stood so quickly, he nearly knocked over his chair. What happened? How is this possible? Your mother experienced what we call a cataleptic state, an extremely rare condition that can be triggered by severe drug interactions. In her case, it appears to have been caused by a combination of her heart medication and a recently prescribed sedative. A sedative? Gregory's brow furrowed. Mom wasn't taking any sedatives. According to her blood work, there was a significant amount of a prescription sedative in her system. The interaction with her existing medication created a state that mimicked death. No detectable pulse or respiration by standard examination methods, body temperature drop, complete muscle rigidity. But she wasn't dead, Vanessa said quietly from her seat. Dr. Chun turned to her. Are you the woman who broke open the casket? Vanessa nodded. Then you saved her life. Dr. Chin's voice was matter of fact. Your mother was conscious throughout this entire ordeal, Mr. Carmichael, aware of everything happening around her, but completely unable to move or communicate. The condition is sometimes called a waking coma. And according to our neurologist, if she'd remained in that state another 45 to 60 minutes without intervention, the lack of oxygen would have caused permanent brain damage. The waiting room fell silent except for the distant beeping of medical equipment and the hushed conversations of other families. Can I see her? Gregory asked. She's sedated now. Actual sedation this time, to help her body recover, but yes. She should be able to communicate in a few hours. Dr. Chin glanced at her tablet. We'll need to investigate how she came to have that sedative in her system. The prescription drug combination that caused this shouldn't have been possible with proper medical oversight. Gregory turned to look at Michelle, who was still standing by the window, her back to the room. Michelle, did Mom mention any new medications to you? Michelle's shoulders tensed, but she didn't turn around. I have no idea, Gregory. I wasn't managing her prescriptions. But something in her voice, something careful and controlled, made Vanessa's skin prickle with renewed unease. This channel brings you real stories of courage and impossible decisions. If these stories matter to you, subscribe and be part of this community. It takes 1 second, but supports hours of work. The hospital cafeteria at 11:30 p.m. was nearly empty, just a few exhausted residents grabbing coffee between shifts and a custodian mopping the floors. Gregory found Vanessa sitting at a corner table, staring at a cup of tea she hadn't touched. Mind if I sit? He asked quietly. Vanessa looked up, startled. Of course. Gregory sat heavily, his expensive suit rumpled, his face drawn with exhaustion. For a long moment, he just stared at his hands. I owe you an apology, he finally said, and my gratitude. And I honestly don't know which matters more right now. You don't owe me anything. I dismissed you. In that chapel lobby, when you tried to warn me, I looked at you like you were insane. His voice cracked slightly. My mother would have died because I didn't listen. Because I trusted Michelle instead of trusting someone who was actually paying attention. You were grieving. People don't think clearly when they're grieving. That's the thing, though. Gregory looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, but sharp. I was grieving. Michelle wasn't. I've been replaying the past 3 days in my head, and Michelle never cried once. Not when Mom's body arrived at the funeral home. Not during the arrangements. Not even today when the paramedics. He stopped, shaking his head. What kind of daughter doesn't cry when they think their mother is dead? Vanessa said nothing, but her expression confirmed she'd noticed the same thing. The funeral arrangements, Gregory continued. Michelle pushed for everything to happen so fast. She insisted on signing the death certificate immediately, no autopsy. She chose a closed casket and wanted it sealed Wednesday night. He met Vanessa's eyes. Why would someone do that unless they wanted to make sure no one looked too closely? Gregory, are you saying you think Michelle? I don't know what I'm saying yet, but I need to find out. He stood abruptly. Thank you, Vanessa, for trusting yourself when no one else did. Over the next 18 hours, Gregory Carmichael did something he never imagined he'd do. He investigated his own sister. He started with the security system at his mother's Lincoln Park townhouse. Elizabeth had installed cameras throughout the house 2 years ago after a string of burglaries in the neighborhood. Gregory accessed the cloud storage from his laptop, scrolling back through the week before his mother's collapse. There was Michelle, arriving on Monday morning with shopping bags from Walgreens. She disappeared into Elizabeth's bedroom for 23 minutes. The timestamp showed 10:47 a.m., right when Elizabeth's daytime caregiver took her lunch break. Tuesday, Michelle again, this time with unmarked pharmacy bags. 17 minutes in Elizabeth's bedroom. Wednesday, Michelle entering the house with nothing visible, but the bedroom camera, which usually had a clear view, showed only static for 42 minutes during her visit. Gregory's hands shook as he made notes, documenting timestamps, trying to find innocent explanations that wouldn't come. He pulled up the death certificate he'd signed Friday morning, the one Michelle had presented to him while he was still in shock, barely able to process that his mother was gone. She'd told him it was standard procedure, that delays would complicate the estate processing, that Mom would have wanted things handled efficiently. He'd signed it without question, without requesting an autopsy, without asking why everything was moving so fast. God, I'm an idiot, Gregory whispered to his empty apartment. At 9 a.m. Friday morning, Gregory called his mother's estate attorney, Martin Berkowitz. Gregory, I'm so relieved Elizabeth is alive. When I heard the news. Martin, I need to ask you about Mom's will. Michelle told me there hadn't been any recent changes. A pause on the other end. Michelle told you that? Yes. What? Gregory, your mother came to see me 6 weeks ago specifically to modify her will. She was quite upset. Martin's voice carried careful professionalism. She discovered unexplained withdrawals from several family accounts. Transfers to offshore accounts she didn't authorize. The total was over $300,000. Gregory felt the floor drop out from under him. $300,000. She believed Michelle had access to her financial accounts and was moving money without authorization. Elizabeth wanted to remove Michelle as executor and significantly reduce her inheritance pending an investigation. Did she confront Michelle about this? She planned to. She scheduled a family meeting for the Monday after she collapsed. Martin cleared his throat. I tried to reach you multiple times over the past week, but Michelle told me you were too distraught to discuss estate matters. Gregory ended the call and immediately dialed Dr. Harrison, his mother's primary physician of 15 years. Dr. Harrison, I need to ask you about my mother's medications. Specifically, did you prescribe her any sedatives in the weeks before her collapse? Sedatives? Absolutely not. Your mother's heart condition made most sedatives contraindicated. I would never prescribe something that could interact dangerously with her existing medications. The hospital found high levels of a prescription sedative in her system. If you didn't prescribe it, then someone else did, or someone gave it to her without a prescription. Gregory, I need to be very clear with you. The drug combination that caused your mother's condition couldn't happen by accident. The specific medications involved require precise knowledge of dangerous interactions. After the call ended, Gregory sat in silence, staring at his phone. Everything was clicking into place with horrible clarity. The rushed funeral, the forged prescriptions, the stolen money, the will change Elizabeth never got to implement. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Pharmacy records pulled. Prescription for sedatives filled at 3 different locations over 2 weeks. Signatures don't match Dr. Harrison's on file. We'll send full report. Gregory had hired a private investigator that morning. a decision that felt surreal, like something from a crime drama rather than his actual life. But the evidence was mounting, and it all pointed in one direction he desperately didn't want to look. His sister hadn't just been negligent. She'd been methodical. Gregory called Vanessa at 2:37 p.m. She answered on the first ring. "Vanessa, it's Gregory. Are you still at the hospital?" "Yes. I took a personal day from work. I wanted to make sure Elizabeth was okay. I need to ask you a favor, and I know it's a lot. Can you stay there? Keep an eye on my mother's room. I'm gathering evidence, but I need to make sure Michelle doesn't." His voice broke. "I need to make sure my mother is safe." "Evidence? Gregory, what did you find?" "Everything. The forged prescriptions, the stolen money, the security footage. Vanessa, I think my sister tried to kill our mother." Saying it out loud made it real, made it impossible to take back. "And if I'm right, she's going to realize Mom can identify her as soon as she wakes up fully. I'm on my way to the police station now, but until I can get protection in place, I'll stay," Vanessa said immediately. "I won't leave her room." "Thank you. I'll be there as soon as I can." Gregory grabbed his laptop, his phone, and the folder of documents he'd compiled. His hands were shaking as he locked his apartment door, but his resolve was steady. He was going to protect his mother. And he was going to make sure Michelle answered for what she'd done, even if it meant destroying what was left of his family. Gregory is starting to suspect his own sister. Could you investigate your own family member if you thought they hurt someone? What would you do? Comment below. The waiting area on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial Hospital was dimly lit at 2:47 a.m., designed to allow families to rest without disturbing the patients down the hall. Vanessa sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, her third cup of vending machine coffee going cold in her hands, watching the corridor that led to Elizabeth's room. She'd been there for nearly 12 hours. Sophia had texted asking when she'd be home, and Vanessa had replied with a half-truth, "Staying with a friend who needs help. Love you, baby." She couldn't explain this. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged softly. Vanessa looked up, expecting another nurse making rounds. Instead, Michelle Carmichael stepped out, her designer purse slung over one shoulder, her heels clicking against the linoleum despite the late hour. Vanessa's entire body tensed. Michelle wasn't supposed to be here. Visiting hours had ended at 9 p.m., and the night nurse had specifically mentioned that only immediate family with special authorization could visit ICU patients overnight. Michelle glanced around the waiting area, her eyes sliding over Vanessa without recognition. In her work uniform with her hair pulled back, sitting in the shadows, Vanessa was as invisible now as she'd always been. Michelle walked purposefully down the corridor toward Elizabeth's room and disappeared inside. Vanessa waited 10 seconds, then stood and moved quietly down the hall. Elizabeth's room was the third door on the left. Through the narrow window, Vanessa could see Michelle standing beside her mother's bed. Elizabeth was still sedated, her breathing assisted by oxygen, various monitors tracking her vital signs. Michelle reached into her designer purse and pulled out a syringe. Vanessa's heart stopped. She pressed closer to the window, watching as Michelle examined the syringe, checked the 4-line running into Elizabeth's arm, and glanced toward the door. "Move," Vanessa's mind screamed. "Do something." But her feet felt rooted to the floor. If she burst in now, Michelle would just claim she was bringing authorized medication. She needed proof. Michelle turned toward the hallway, and Vanessa ducked back, flattening herself against the wall. She heard Michelle's heels clicking toward the nursing station around the corner. Vanessa risked a glance and saw Michelle speaking with the night nurse, a young woman named Jessica, whose nameplate Vanessa had noted earlier. "I have authorization from Dr. Chun to administer my mother's pain medication." Michelle's voice carried down the quiet hallway, smooth and confident. "She's been in significant discomfort, and the doctor wanted to ensure she rests properly." "Let me just check the chart," Jessica said, reaching for her computer. This was Vanessa's moment. She moved quickly to the nursing station, her heart hammering. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm a friend of the family. Is there a medication order for Elizabeth Carmichael right now?" Jessica looked up, surprised. "I'm just checking now, but," she frowned at her screen. "No, there's no new medication order logged in the system for Mrs. Carmichael." Michelle's expression remained perfectly composed, but something flickered in her eyes. "There must be a mistake. Dr. Chun called me specifically." "Dr. Chun isn't on duty tonight," Jessica said, her tone becoming firmer. And even if she were, all medication orders go through the system. There's nothing here. Then I'll speak with the attending physician directly. Thank you for your diligence. Michelle's smile was ice. She turned and walked back toward Elizabeth's room, the syringe still in her hand. Vanessa ran after her. Wait, you can't. But Michelle had already entered Elizabeth's room and locked the door behind her. Vanessa reached the door and grabbed the handle. Locked. Through the window, she saw Michelle standing over her mother's bed, the syringe raised above the four-line, her thumb on the plunger. Security, Vanessa screamed, pounding on the door with both fists. Somebody help. She's going to. Inside the room, Michelle's head snapped toward the door. For 3 terrible seconds, their eyes met through the glass. Michelle's expression was completely calm, calculating, as if she were weighing whether she had time to finish what she'd started before someone could stop her. Vanessa slammed her palm against the emergency call button beside the door. Jessica, override the lock. Now, I'm trying. Jessica's voice was panicked. The system is, hold on. Through the window, Vanessa watched Michelle hold the syringe steady, still poised above Elizabeth's fore. The machines surrounding Elizabeth beeped steadily, tracking a heartbeat that could stop at any moment if Michelle made her decision. Please, Vanessa whispered, pressing her face against the glass. Please don't. Michelle's eyes never left Vanessa's. In that moment, Vanessa saw something that made her blood run cold. Not rage or desperation, but pure, cold assessment. Michelle was deciding whether Vanessa's witness testimony would be more damaging than leaving Elizabeth alive. The door lock buzzed and clicked. Vanessa shoved it open and burst into the room, just as Michelle smoothly lowered the syringe, her expression transforming instantly into concerned confusion. Oh, thank goodness you're here, Michelle said, her voice carrying perfect distress. I found this on the floor near my mother's bed. Can you imagine if a patient had gotten hold of it? Someone must have dropped it during the last medication round. Jessica rushed in behind Vanessa, followed by a security guard who'd been making rounds on the floor below. Miss Carmichael, step away from the patient, the guard said firmly. Of course. I was just about to call for help. Michelle held out the syringe, her hand steady. This was on the floor. I was worried someone might step on it, or that it posed a contamination risk. The security guard took the syringe carefully, examining it. This is a morphine injection. A high dosage. Morphine. Michelle's eyes widened with what looked like genuine shock. That's what I was afraid of. My mother is allergic to morphine. It's in her chart. If someone had accidentally administered this, she shuddered convincingly. Thank God I found it before anyone made that mistake. Jessica was already checking Elizabeth's chart on the room computer. Mrs. Carmichael does have a severe allergy to morphine listed. This dosage would have been. She stopped, her face pale. Would have been what? Vanessa demanded. Potentially fatal, given her current condition and the allergy. Jessica finished quietly. Then it's a good thing I came to check on my mother when I did. Michelle turned to Vanessa, her expression sympathetic. I understand you've been keeping vigil here. That's very kind of you. But perhaps you should go home and rest. You look exhausted, and I'm sure this has all been very stressful for you. The security guard was already calling for his supervisor. Within minutes, the hospital's head of security arrived, along with a risk management administrator. They documented everything: the syringe, Michelle's explanation, the lack of authorization for any morphine administration. But the story was flawless. Michelle had found the syringe on the floor. She'd been about to alert staff. She'd potentially prevented a tragic medical error. There was no proof she'd brought the syringe herself, no evidence on security cameras showing where it had come from, no witnesses who'd seen her with it before she'd spoken to Jessica. By 4:30 a.m., after statements had been taken and incident reports filed, Michelle was free to leave. She paused beside Vanessa in the hallway, her voice low enough that only Vanessa could hear. You should be careful, spending so much time in hospitals. They can be dangerous places. Accidents happen all the time. She smiled, warm and condescending. Go home to your daughter, Vanessa. I'm sure she needs you. Vanessa's blood ran cold. Michelle knew about Sophia, which meant Michelle had been paying attention, gathering information, preparing for obstacles. As Michelle walked toward the elevator, her heels clicking confidently against the floor, Vanessa pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called Gregory. Vanessa saved Elizabeth once. Now she's caught Michelle in the act. But can she prove it? What would you say to the police in this moment? Comment below. Gregory arrived at Northwestern Memorial at 3:52 a.m., his hair disheveled, still wearing sweatpants and a Northwestern hoodie he'd thrown on after Vanessa's call. His face was pale, but his jaw was set with determination. "Where is she?" he demanded, finding Vanessa in the waiting area. They moved her to a private room on the 6th floor. "Gregory, Michelle had a syringe with morphine, your mother's listed allergy." "If I hadn't." "I know. I believe you." He grabbed her hand briefly, squeezing it. "I'm requesting immediate toxicology screening. Everything in her system needs to be documented before Michelle has another chance." "Mr. Carmichael?" A hospital administrator appeared, a thin woman in her 50s with a tablet and an expression of professional concern. "I'm Carol Winters, head of patient services. I need to speak with you about the incident tonight." "Good. I want full security on my mother's room. No visitors without my explicit authorization. That's actually what I need to discuss. Your sister has filed emergency medical power of attorney paperwork. It was validated by the court this evening, properly notarized, witnessed, signed by your mother 6 months ago." Carol handed him her tablet. "According to this document, Michelle Carmichael has complete legal authority over your mother's medical decisions." Gregory stared at the screen, his face draining of color. "That's impossible. Mom would never." "The signature matches samples we have on file from your mother's previous hospital visits. The document is legally binding." Carol's tone was apologetic but firm, which means Michelle has the authority to approve or deny any medical procedures, including toxicology screenings. "She tried to kill our mother." "Mr. Carmichael, I understand you're under tremendous stress, but those are serious accusations. Hospital security investigated tonight's incident thoroughly. There's no evidence your sister brought that syringe or intended harm. She reported finding it, which potentially prevented a serious medical error." At 6:47 a.m., 2 police officers arrived to take Vanessa's statement. Detective Robert Martinez listened with patient professionalism as Vanessa explained everything she'd witnessed. "So you saw Ms. Carmichael with a syringe in the patient's room," Detective Martinez summarized, making notes. "But hospital staff confirmed she immediately reported finding it and expressed concern about it being near her mother. She was standing over the bed with it raised toward the 4 line. I saw her through the window before I could get the door open." "Did you see her actually inject anything into the 4? "No, because I stopped her." "So what we have is Ms. Carmichael in her mother's room, holding a syringe she claims to have found on the floor, which hospital security confirmed wasn't prescribed or documented." Detective Martinez closed his notepad. "Miss Hartley, I appreciate your vigilance, but legally speaking, there's no crime here. Finding medical equipment and reporting it isn't illegal. She mentioned my daughter. She knows where Sophia goes to school." "Did she threaten your daughter specifically?" Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Michelle's words echoed in her memory. "Go home to your daughter, Vanessa. I'm sure she needs you." Not a threat, just a statement that could mean anything. "That's what I thought," Detective Martinez said gently. "Look, if you have concrete evidence of a crime, bring it to us. But right now, all you have are suspicions." At 9:23 a.m., Vanessa's phone rang. Mr. Henderson from Riverside Memorial, his voice stiff and uncomfortable. "Vanessa, I'm calling to inform you that you've been placed on administrative leave pending a formal investigation into your conduct." "My conduct? I saved a woman's life. You destroyed property, disrupted a funeral service, and caused significant distress to grieving family members. Additionally, the Carmichael family's legal counsel has contacted us regarding your continued presence at the hospital and what they're characterizing as harassment." Michelle tried to. "Vanessa, stop. I'm advising you as someone who's worked with you for 6 years. Stop making these accusations. The Carmichael family is prepared to file a defamation lawsuit if you continue. They have resources and lawyers, and you," he paused delicately, "you don't. Take the leave. Stay away from the hospital. Let the family handle their private matters." At 11:15 a.m., Vanessa received a formal letter via email from Morrison and Klein, attorneys at law, on behalf of Michelle Carmichael. The language was dense and threatening, but the message was clear. Cease all contact with the Carmichael family. Stop making false accusations or face legal action for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Vanessa sat in her apartment, staring at her laptop screen, feeling the walls closing in. No job, no credibility, legal threats mounting, and still no proof that would stand up in court. Her phone rang at 3:47 p.m. Sophia, her voice tight with fear. Mom? Are you home? Not yet, baby. What's wrong? There's a car that's been following me home from school. A black sedan. I thought I was being paranoid, but it's been there yesterday and today. It slows down when I walk, speeds up when I speed up. Mom, I'm scared. Vanessa's blood ran cold. Where are you right now? Corner of 53rd and Harper. There's a Walgreens. I went inside because I didn't want to go home alone. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. Do not leave that store. Vanessa grabbed her keys and ran for her car, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get the key in the ignition. She drove to Sophia's location in 12 minutes that felt like 12 hours, scanning every black sedan she passed. Sophia was standing inside the Walgreens, her backpack clutched to her chest, trying to look brave but failing. Vanessa wrapped her in a fierce hug. Did you see who was driving? No. The windows were tinted. Mom, what's going on? Why would someone follow me? Vanessa couldn't answer. Couldn't explain that saving someone's life had somehow made her 16-year-old daughter a target. They drove home in silence. Vanessa checked the rearview mirror obsessively, but no black sedan appeared. Once inside their apartment with the door locked and chained, Vanessa tried to act normal, tried to pretend everything was fine while Sophia did her homework at the kitchen table. At 8:34 p.m., Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You saved her once. Don't make us include you in the tragedy. Vanessa stared at the screen, her breath catching. Us. Plural. Michelle wasn't working alone. She looked at Sophia, bent over her algebra textbook, completely unaware of the dangers circling their lives. Vanessa had done the right thing. She'd saved Elizabeth's life. But the cost of doing right was becoming unbearable. Another text arrived. Think about what matters most. Your daughter's safety or a stranger's life? Choose wisely. Vanessa deleted both messages with trembling fingers, but the words were already burned into her mind. She was being given a choice. Abandon Elizabeth to whatever Michelle had planned, or continue fighting and risk Sophia paying the price. She sat on the couch, watching her daughter work through math problems, and realized that sometimes doing the right thing meant losing everything. And she had no idea what choice she was going to make. Vanessa is losing everything for doing the right thing. If you were her friend, what advice would you give her right now? Comment below. Vanessa's phone shattered the silence at 11:43 p.m. Gregory's name flashed on the screen. They're calling a code on my mother. His voice was raw with panic. Her vitals are crashing. I'm on my way to the hospital now. Vanessa was already reaching for her keys when Sophia appeared in her bedroom doorway, groggy and confused. Mom? What's happening? I have to go help someone. Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone. Vanessa kissed her forehead quickly. I'll be back as soon as I can. Mom, you're scaring me. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Just stay inside. Please. The drive to Northwestern Memorial was a blur of red lights and racing thoughts. By the time Vanessa reached the 6th floor, a team of medical staff was rushing in and out of Elizabeth's room. Gregory stood in the hallway, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. They won't let me in, he said when he saw Vanessa. Michelle invoked her power of attorney. She's in there with the doctors, and hospital security physically blocked me from entering my own mother's room. Through the window, Vanessa could see Michelle standing calmly in the corner, her arms crossed, watching the medical team work on Elizabeth with an expression that looked less like concern and more like patience. What happened to her vitals? Vanessa asked. Respiratory distress. Heart arrhythmia. The attending physician said it came on suddenly, but Gregory's voice dropped to a whisper. Vanessa, what if Michelle found another way? At 12:17 a.m., Vanessa's phone buzzed with an incoming message. No number, just an image file. Her hands shook as she opened it. Photos. 4 of them. Sophia at Lincoln Elementary during recess, sitting on a bench with her friends. Close-up shots, so close that Vanessa could see the butterfly clip in Sophia's hair, could read the title of the book in her lap. Someone had been within feet of her daughter. Someone had been that close, taking pictures, and Sophia had never known. A text followed. Beautiful girl. Be a shame if something happened to her. Vanessa's legs gave out. She collapsed into a waiting room chair, her vision blurring with tears of rage and terror. "Vanessa?" Gregory knelt beside her. "What is it?" She showed him the photos without speaking. Gregory's face darkened. "That's it. I'm calling the police again. This is a direct threat." "Mr. Carmichael?" Detective Martinez appeared in the hallway, having been called by hospital security about the medical emergency. He listened as Gregory explained about the photos, then examined Vanessa's phone with professional detachment. The message came from a burner phone. No way to trace it. And technically, taking photos in a public space isn't illegal. He handed the phone back. "The implied threat is concerning, but without explicit language." "Without explicit language?" Vanessa's voice cracked. "They photographed my daughter at school. They're telling me to back off, or she gets hurt. I understand your fear, Miss Hartley, but I can't arrest someone based on anonymous photos and vague implications." Detective Martinez's expression softened slightly. "My advice: let the professionals handle the Carmichael situation. Think about your daughter's safety. Sometimes the brave thing isn't fighting, it's knowing when to step back." At 1:33 a.m., Gregory received an email from the hospital's laboratory director. The toxicology screening he'd requested had been delayed due to chain of custody complications. Michelle's lawyers had filed paperwork questioning the validity of the test since she, as medical power of attorney holder, hadn't authorized it. The samples were being held pending legal review. "She's blocking everything," Gregory said, showing Vanessa the email. "Every avenue I try, she's already there with lawyers and paperwork. It's like she planned for all of this." At 2:18 a.m., Vanessa's phone rang. A Chicago area code she didn't recognize. "Ms. Hartley? This is Jennifer Moss from the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. I'm calling about a report we received concerning your daughter, Sophia." Vanessa's blood turned to ice. "What report?" "An anonymous report was filed this evening citing concerns about mental instability and obsessive behavior that may be endangering a minor child in your care. We'll need to schedule a home visit to assess the situation." "This is insane. Someone is trying to." "I understand this is upsetting, Ms. Hartley, but we're obligated to investigate all reports. Someone will contact you Monday to arrange the visit. In the meantime, I'd advise you to ensure your home environment is stable and that your daughter is being properly cared for." The call ended. Vanessa sat frozen, her phone still pressed to her ear, understanding with absolute clarity what was happening. Michelle was systematically destroying every aspect of her life, her job, her credibility, her reputation, and now threatening to take Sophia away through the very system designed to protect children. At 2:30 a.m., Gregory sat beside her, his voice quiet and desperate. "I can't do this without you, Vanessa. I've got the security footage, the financial records, the forged prescriptions, but it's all circumstantial. You're the only witness who can testify to what you saw in that casket at the hospital with the syringe. Your testimony is the timeline that proves intent." He paused. "But I also understand if you can't. If you need to protect Sophia. If I testify, they'll take her." Vanessa's voice was hollow. "Michelle will make sure of it. The CPS report, the threatening texts, the photos. They'll paint me as unstable, obsessed, dangerous to my own child. And I'll lose her. I know. But if I don't testify, Elizabeth dies. Michelle succeeds. And Sophia grows up with a mother who chose safety over standing up for what's right." Vanessa looked at Gregory. "That's not the woman I want her to become." They sat in silence as the hospital hummed around them with the sounds of late-night emergencies and quiet recoveries. At 4:15 a.m., Vanessa drove home through empty Chicago streets. She found Sophia asleep on the couch, having waited up for her mother before exhaustion won. Vanessa stood in the doorway watching her daughter sleep. Peaceful, innocent, safe for this moment, but vulnerable in ways that made Vanessa's chest ache. Her phone was still in her hand. She should call Gregory. Tell him she'd testify. Do the right thing regardless of cost. But looking at Sophia's face, Vanessa understood why people stayed silent. Why witnesses recanted. Why good people looked away. Because courage was easy when you were the only one who'd pay the price. It became impossible when someone else, someone you loved more than yourself, would suffer for your choices. At 4:47 a.m., Vanessa's phone rang. Northwestern Memorial Hospital. "Ms. Hartley? This is the ICU nursing station. Elizabeth Carmichael has taken a critical turn. The family should come immediately if they want to," the nurse's voice caught. "If they want to be present." I'll be there in 20 minutes. Vanessa grabbed her keys from the kitchen counter. As she reached for the apartment door, a sharp knock made her freeze. This late? This early? Nobody knocked at 4:47 a.m. with good intentions. She moved to the peephole. Two figures stood in the hallway, dressed in dark clothing, their faces partially obscured by hoodies. One of them bent down, and a white envelope slid under her door. Vanessa picked it up with trembling hands and read the typed message. Final warning. Walk away now, or your daughter becomes an orphan. Her phone was still in her other hand, the hospital still on the line waiting for her response. Another knock sounded at the door, harder this time, more insistent. Vanessa's hand hovered over the doorknob. Behind her, Sophia stirred on the couch, still asleep but vulnerable. In her phone, a nurse waited for confirmation that she was coming. Outside her door, two people who'd just threatened to make her daughter an orphan. If she opened that door to confront them, she might never make it to the hospital. If she stayed silent and protected Sophia, Elizabeth would die alone. If she tried to leave for the hospital, these people would know she'd chosen to ignore their warning, and Sophia would be home alone, unprotected. One choice, one moment, and no possible way to save everyone. Vanessa stood frozen in her apartment, her hand on the doorknob, her daughter sleeping behind her, the hospital waiting on the line, and two threatening figures standing in her hallway. She had seconds to decide, and every choice led to someone she loved getting hurt. This is where I need you more than ever. If you want to see part 2 of this story, if you need to know whether Vanessa saves Elizabeth or protects Sophia, whether Michelle faces justice or gets away with everything, then hit that like button, smash subscribe, and comment part 2 right now. I'm reading every single comment, and if enough of you want to see how this ends, I'll tell you the rest. But I need to know you're with me. Comment part 2 if you're invested in Vanessa's story. Do it now.